Greetings, dear students. Welcome to another session on the process of risk management. What we have seen earlier is what is risk, what are different types of risks. Are risks always the threats, or risks can be opportunities as well? Further to which we discussed the life cycle of the risk, which is composed of 5 phases. We discussed the planning phase, and we were to look at the identify phase of risk management, wherein we discussed few points of the identification phase, and let us recollect the 5 phases of the risk life cycle: the planning phase, the identify phase, then the analysis phase, then we have the risk response planning phase, and the last is monitoring and controlling the risk responses. When we look at the risk identification phase, as discussed earlier, we can make use of a lot of techniques like the brainstorming techniques, like the Delphi technique and the interviewing technique. Further to which we can also make use of the root cause analysis. We can make use of the SWOT analysis. And we'll discuss a little today about the root cause analysis and the SWOT analysis, which are one of the wonderful techniques as used in management, as used in the Six Sigma techniques. Now, the root cause analysis in particular takes the team towards the root of the problem. And here we make use of the 5I technique, which is again used in Six Sigma. So we look at the problem, we look at various areas the problem is existing for. So let us discuss an example. For instance, there is a risk in a company that the employees may quit their job, and employees do not sustain in that organization for a longer duration. So there is a risk of loss of employees in the company. And now, while identifying this risk, we need to know the exact reason for why people are leaving their jobs, wherein we can make use of the root cause analysis technique. Into this technique, we make use of the very classic fishbone diagram, and we spread the problem definition around 5 major causes of the problem. The problem can be caused because of man related problem, people related problem. It can be caused because of some machine related problem. It can be caused because of the methods related problem. There may be some problems in the processes, existing processes, and that is the reason employees are quitting their jobs, I should say. Then there is another area that is called the mother nature area, wherein employees are quitting their job for some very natural causes in the organization, around the organization. This can again be lot of other causes, like the environmental causes, like some other geographical causes. Okay. We can also look at the customer aspect. Is it because of the customer that people are losing their job? And likewise, we spread the entire problem into various causes, look at various causes that are really causing the problem, and we reach to the root cause of the problem. And this helps the project manager to look at the core, the root cause of the problem, and that is where it helps him to identify the core of the risk. And not only he not only revolves around the risk, but he gets to understand the core cause of the risk. Another technique that we need to discuss is the SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis, many of you may be aware of, must have used it, must have seen it somewhere. It is one of the wonderful, again, management techniques as used everywhere, that discusses the strength, the weakness, the opportunity, and the threat that is caused due to the problem. So when you identify a risk, being a project manager, that particular risk, what will be the strengths if the risk will occur? What will be the weaknesses if the risk will occur? What will be the new opportunities that may come up when the risk occurs? And what will be the threats because of the risk that occurs? So you have to do this thorough analysis, and that is where you may come towards a list of strengths, a list of weaknesses, list of opportunities and threats, and you can sum up all those whatever information you have gathered related to SWOT, and then you can conclude for whether the risk is opportunistic, whether it is a threat, whether if the risk occurs, the organization will suffer a lot or it will overcome. So these are various risk identification techniques. Let us recollect again. First technique is applying information gathering techniques, like the brainstorming technique, the Delphi technique, the interview technique. Further to which we can make use of the root cause analysis technique, we can make use of the SWOT analysis. And this is all about the risk identification phase, dear students. What comes after the risk identification phase next in the risk life cycle is the risk analysis. Now, risk analysis is one of the core phases of the risk life cycle. In the process of risk analysis, we now that we have identified the risk, now that we already have a plan for the risks that we have identified, how to tackle with the risks, we already have a plan of people and the time and the schedule and the work they are going to do in the plan phase. We have already list of risks with us. We already have the list of risks with us. Now what to do with the list of risks? So further we need to analyze, we need to study all these risks in depth. And here comes the process of qualitative risk analysis. And by qualitative risk analysis, we mean we categorize these risks as the high priority risk, the medium priority risk, and the low priority risk. There are two things we look upon in the process of risk analysis. We look for how to prioritize the risks, and further we look at the impact that is associated because of the risk. So what is going to be the impact if the risk is caused? So I'll again take you to the layman's example of a risk. So it is like it's the risk. There is a risk of falling ill. It's rainfall outside, and there is a risk associated with. So now this risk associated with, is it of high priority, is it of medium priority, is it of low priority? So if I am going to remain in my office for another 5 hours, this is a low priority. Even if it's raining outside and I don't need to walk on the street, it's a low priority risk for me. I don't bother about that risk. Why so? Why is it low priority? Because certainly it's not going to affect me right away. So by priority, what do we mean? By priority, we mean where should we set the risk to, and where does it exactly stand, and how much importance is it giving to the current work process. It can be a medium priority risk if I am a person carrying some valuables with me, and without an umbrella and without a raincoat, I need to cross the street. It is a high priority risk in case I'm carrying some valuable and it's very urgent for me to move outside ASAP. So in that case, it's a high priority risk. I have to first think about it's raining outside and how should I come out of this, because I'm affected. So by priority, the more higher is the priority of the risk, more is the effect of that risk to the organization. So likewise, while working on projects, the risks are identified, and in the analysis phase you set the priority of the risk. How important is the risk, and how more is going to be the effect, maybe the positive effect or the negative effect of the risk. How is it going to affect the organization? So based on that, you will prioritize the risks. Now in the phase of qualitative risk analysis, we generally make use of matrix which is called the risk impact matrix. Now this risk impact matrix, this crosses on the columns and rows, it keeps the priority of the risk and it keeps the impact factor of the risks associated with. Now what is impact factor of a risk? Impact is what all hurdles, I should say, or what all problems this risk is going to cause to the organization once it occurs. More is the impact factor, more dangerous is the risk. Less is the impact factor, less dangerous is the risk. Less threatening is the risk. Now this impact factor can be measured as probability from 0 to 1. You can measure the impact of the risk, and you can plot a matrix of the priority of the risk and the impact of the risk. Generally, priority may not have anything to do with the impact. Priority talks about how important is the risk, and the impact factor talks about what is going to be the after effect of that risk. Okay, so that is where when you cross these two in rows and columns, you get the risk impact factor, and you choose the set of risks that now you have to tackle with that carry the even in impact factor, neither the low impact factor, neither the very high priority. So you pick up all such risks, and further what you do with such risks, then you do the quantitative risk analysis on these risks. Now, quantitative risk analysis is a process that generally makes use of statistics or numerical analysis, and it actually plays with this probability and impact. It determines the overall project risks. It determines the quantified probability of meeting the project objectives. It determines the cost reserves and the schedule reserves associated with the project. It identifies the risk requiring the most attention, looking at the risk impact matrix, whatever you have generated in the qualitative risk analysis. It creates a realistic cost, schedule, and scope target for the project. And it also involves making use of decision trees and Monte Carlo analysis kind of statistical techniques that let the project manager take some good decision on whatever risks are so long being prioritized, so long the impact factor of such risks have been identified. He can pick up a risk now, and now he can really work upon for, and making use of some statistical technique, he can take a decision associated with that risk. So quickly, let us again think about what is done in the qualitative risk analysis. We have got the list of risks with us along with the priority. So the project manager picks up a particular risk. He will apply some statistical technique, some numerical technique on this risk that will let him take some decision on the risk associated. Now the decision may be related to the cost reserves, the time reserves. It may be related to whether to go ahead with a particular decision or not. And likewise, he is able to make decisions. Now, the quantitative risk analysis, it gives you a strong support, and practically talking, it cannot be worked without data. So you need to have data to work with the quantitative risk analysis. You need to have some facts and figures with you. Unlike in the qualitative risk analysis, where you simply need to list the risks based on their priority and impact factor. So more of the calculation parts is done in the quantitative risk analysis. Let us go for an example of making use of some statistical technique. So let us look at how to work with decision trees using the quantitative, one of the risk analysis methods, the decision tree. So an example is, there is a company. The company is trying to find if prototyping is worth to do for a project. And here we have the prototype setup cost of $2 million. What is a prototype? Many of you may be knowing what a prototype is. So let me tell you again. Prototype is nothing but working model for a system. It is as good as the blueprint and architecture may carry before the construction of a house takes place. And likewise, for any product that has to be developed, we first create a small working model, and we then demonstrate it to the customer. If the customer is happy, and if the entire team, including the management, is all right with the look and feel of the product, then we can really go ahead and building at a large scale the product, and a product in a more working condition. A prototype may be in a working condition, or it may only give you the look and feel of the product. So now there is a company, and there is a problem associated wherein the project manager has to take a decision for whether to make use of a prototype or not to make use of a prototype. Now the fact is that, see, now as we have seen, the quantitative risk analysis is always based on facts and figures. So here it's given that the prototype setup cost for the prototype is going to be $2 million. Okay. Now, what is it? Further to it, it's put that there is a probability of 35% that the project would fail, and there will be a loss of $1 million, some 20,000, and this will be the impact on the cost. So what is it? If the company wants to set up a prototype, so they are already, I should say, either investing or they are wasting $2 million, further to which 35% probability is there that the project will fail, even if you run the prototype prior to developing the real project, and you are at a loss of $1,020,000. So it's all talking about losses and wastage of 2 million, wastage of 1,020,000. Okay. The other option with the project manager is, let us not make use of the prototype, let us not make use of any blueprint, let us not make use of any working model, let us directly start developing the product. So here the setup cost remains no dollars, $0. But now there is a probability of 70% that the project will fail, and there will be tremendous losses. The losses can go up to 4,050,000. More losses, and there are more chances of failure of the project. Now, there is no impact if the project is implemented with a successful prototype or without a successful prototype. So now the project manager has to take a decision because it is up to him whether to make use of the prototype, whether not to make use of the prototype. As in, there is not going to be much impact on the project, but he has to take a decision. How does he take the decision? So he makes use of the decision tree technique, wherein there are two branches to this decision tree. The branch 1 tells him to make use of the prototype, and the branch 2 tells him to not to make use of the prototype. Now, as the first option, wherein the first branch of the tree talks about, let us make use of the prototype. Okay, fine. So the team decides to make use of prototype, so they are going to spend $2 million as the setup cost. Further to which, they need to find what is going to be the loss of 35%. What is the 35% of $1,020,000? When they find it out, they come to understand that the team will be at a loss of $2,042,000. How do they do that? They find out the impact of what is going to be the 35% loss. In case of a loss of $1,020,000, let us look at the 35% loss of that particular project. So that is how the total loss goes to $2,042,000. There is another option, the branch 2 option, wherein the prototype setup cost is $0. So there is no need of any setup cost over here. But there is a chance of 70%. There is probability of 70%. And at a loss of $4,050,000, they will be at a loss. So let us find what is going to be 70% of $4,050,000. When we add it up to no other dollars, the loss comes out to be $3,015,000. So now what we get to understand here is, if we do not make use of the prototype, we are at a more loss. Although initially when we looked at the problem, there was a additional setup cost involved making use of the prototype. So therein, when you read the problem, it appeared to be that you are wasting a lot of money implementing the prototype and showing it to the customer, and then further building the real product, and then even if the project fails, and there is going to be a loss of some 35%, okay, and you will be at a loss of $1,020,000. So it was talking about all losses, but the decision tree technique is telling the project manager that you do invest and not waste. How much of the $2 million you invest it and build a prototype? You first showcase the prototype and then you start developing the new product. Likewise, you will be, even if you will be incurring losses, the losses will be less as compared to doing the project without implementing any prototype ahead of developing the product. So this is what is your quantitative risk analysis. And quantitative risk analysis thus gives the project manager a huge set of evidence, and based on which he can take good decisions. And this is how, dear friends, the analysis phase of risk life cycle is the most important, the core phase amongst all phases. Well, now that we have seen the planning phase, the identification phase, and the analysis phase, the next phase comes to how to respond to these risks. Now that we have seen the risk and we are able to take the decision, but looking at two types of risks, which are the opportunity type of risks and the threat type of risks. So now let us look at how to respond to these two types of risks and how to get rid of these risks. Okay. So when I am talking about opportunities, we have to see to it that if the risk is positive, we have to increase the opportunities. And if the risk is a negative risk, that time we need to reduce the threats associated with the risk. And we need to come across, and I should say we need to mitigate that risk. Okay. So in short, there is a wonderful theory around the risk response planning that tells that if the risk is negative in nature and if it's a threat type of risk, that time you strictly need to avoid such risk from its occurrence. You take all measures and do not let such risk occur. Second point is to mitigate. Now in case this risk comes into existence, you are not able to avoid the risk, okay, let it occur, but then you try to mitigate, you try to minimize the impact of the risk. And the third part is you better transfer the risk and let a third party handle the risk. Okay, so now let us look at the threatening type of risk, that there is a risk of occurrence of an earthquake and in a particular geographical location, and a building is under construction. Okay, so the building is under construction. So we can look for using some construction technique that would eliminate not the earthquake from occurrence, but it will eliminate all the side effects that are occurring because of the earthquake. Either you do not construct a building in that area. That is how you can avoid the risk. Next part is mitigate. You are not able to avoid, you cannot say no to the earthquake, and you cannot say no to construct anything on a land wherein you have already started your construction and taken a lot of efforts taking the legal permissions. You have started a little with the construction. You cannot avoid the risk from occurring. So you try to reduce it further. So you try to mitigate it by making use of the right technology and making your building the earthquake proof building. So you are mitigating the risk of occurrence of the earthquake. Fine. And now if you are not able to do anything and the earthquake occurs and you do not have the adequate technology to deal with people residing in that particular building, in that case you need to transfer it to a third party. So if your company is not able to manage with the risk, in that case you better transfer the whole work to a third party and let the third party look at how to avoid the risk and how to mitigate the risk. You can hand over the risk to a third party and get your work done. So what students you need to keep in mind is, whatever are the threats type of risks, strictly avoid these risks, eliminate the cause from occurring. Then you need to minimize the effect, the impact of the risks that are occurring. And next, you need to transfer the risk to a third party. So these are the three thumb rules to respond to the risks of the type threats. The other type of risks that we discussed is of the type of opportunity. So the risks that are positive in nature and that are giving new opportunities to the business processes, getting more business, such type of risks, you have to first exploit them. You do not avoid them, you exploit them, on the contrary. So whatever is done in the threat part, exactly the opposite is done in the opportunity type of risk part. You study in depth that particular risk, exploit it. Further, you enhance, increase the impact of the risk. Let there be a larger, let the risk affect at a larger scale to the organization. So it should be enhanced. And last, you need to share the risk with your team, with your management, so that they can work upon and they can come up with some good solution, and so that their business grows. And at the end of it, everybody benefits since an opportunity has come up. Okay. So let us talk of, since you are students, I would link you to the student life cycle. Okay. So let us assume that you want to take your future education and you have enrolled with a wonderful university. Okay. And the university finds that there are lot of students approaching to take admissions to the university, but they are not able to cope up and provide solutions and imparting knowledge to all these students. So there are millions of students who are in need of a particular course. Okay. So initially, now, is it a positive risk or it's a negative risk? Definitely it's going to be a positive risk. Certainly, so many students are coming to the institution. It's a little of threat as well, because the management doesn't know whether they will be able to tackle with so many number of students. They don't have enough resources right now. So how would they impart knowledge to so many students? So it's a mix of threat. It's a mix of opportunity. So I, being a positive person, definitely consider this as an opportunity. I have a lot of students whom I can impart the knowledge on a particular course. What will I do? I will study in depth why so many students are approaching a particular university and a particular course. I will look into the course structure. I will look into the students' interests. Further, enhance. So I'm going to check with what is going to be the impact on the university if so many students will enroll for a particular course. So I will see to it that impact of the number of students coming to the university, it increases. It increases either, I should say, the contents of the course, or I can rework on the contents of the course, make it more beautiful. I can change the methodology of imparting knowledge. And so what I am doing, I am enhancing, I am increasing the impact of more students are coming to enroll for a particular course in a university. So I am increasing the impact of their occurrence. And end of it, I would share this fact with relative people, so that what will happen again, they would sit together, they would discuss, they would brainstorm, and further they may come up with another methodology through which they develop an effective way to impart knowledge to n number of such students and to make them comfortable with the university. Okay, let us take the example, a threat type of example. Many students are who had enrolled for a course, now they are not interested in the course anymore, and probably in the first year they have taken the admission, and second year less number of students are found, and the third year very little number of students. This is a threat for any school, a business school or any other school or a university. So what to do in this case? This is a threat. So what to do? First, avoid. So within the processes itself, you do not let the student feel, looking at the course structure, looking at the way the knowledge is delivered, looking at the processes, looking at the communication with the students, do not let them feel that they need to go away from a particular course and take up another course. So avoid it. So you avoid it, the threat type of risk. Second is the mitigate risk. Mitigate risk is you try to reduce the impact of the risk. So what will I do if I find in a particular course the students are not taking that course till the end? So as soon as they reach in the mid, I'll give them something more valuable, more assuring, and something that they can really look upon, and they build their hopes more. So I'm mitigating the occurrence of this risk. And last is I would transfer. So if I am not probably able to handle this, I may call a wonderful consultant and who will take up this entire issue of students leaving a particular course and registering for some other course. And that consultant would take care of this whole risk of loss of students. So I have discussed with you two types of occurrences. Number of students increasing, taking admissions in a particular university. That's opportunity type of risk. And how to respond to it, I have taught you. Secondly, a particular course in a university, students do take admission for that particular course, but gradually as they reach the final year, they switch over to some other course. So this is a threat, and I have also discussed with you how to avoid, how to mitigate, and how to transfer the risk. So this is about the risk response planning phase. Now let us discuss probably the last phase of the risk life cycle. So the last phase is the risk monitoring and control phase. Now this particular phase, what we have seen so far, we need to plan, we need to identify the risk, we need to study the risk in depth, and we need to look for a response plan for the risk. Once we are done with all this, now what? Now that I have made some changes in the current processes, now that I am working on the risk, what I need to do ahead is I need to constantly monitor and control whatever responses I am giving to a particular risk. I need to check it out. So here in what do? I look up for occurrence of risk triggers. Although now the risk is mitigated, it's minimized, but I always keep on checking, are there any more, students, now that I have made changes to the courseware, still are there any more students who are changing the course in between? So I'm still looking for the risk triggers. A student found being talking to another student to opt for another course. So a trigger has occurred and I immediately need to work on it. This is how I monitor the risk. Secondly, I need to monitor the residual risks. Now, what is a residual risk, dear students? So, whenever a particular risk is identified and as you try to mitigate that risk, there comes another bubble of a small risk out of minimizing this particular risk. Okay, so now students are no more changing the course. That is a true fact. But it has been found that students are not at all enrolling for a course, neither in the first year. So there is a residual, a small bubble that has now come, a different type of risk that has come up while tackling with another risk of students changing the course in the final year. This is what is called a residual risk. So I need to monitor such occurrences of such residual risks. Third thing that I need to do is I need to identify new risks and plan for them. So again, if I come across such residual risk, I have to again plan for that. And that is why if you look at the diagram that I had shown you earlier, from the monitoring and control phase, the arrow goes up to the plan phase. It is for the residual risks. The new risks that arise, you again plan for the risk. And again, you have to identify, again, you have to analyze and likewise go through the whole life cycle of the risk. Next, you need to evaluate the effectiveness of the risk management plan. Whatever plan you have put into execution, you have to check for the effectiveness. Why so? Because if your plan is not so effective this time, you can in future, whatever risks you will be tackling with, you can take a better plan. And then whatever shortcomings are found in the current plan, as I have told you, the historical records are one of the beautiful things that a project manager can always look at so as to tackle with the risks. So this becomes a history, and next time I work with other type of risks, I make a better plan. Okay. Next, in monitoring and control, I develop new risk response strategies. So herein, I am looking for new strategies to respond to the risk. That is another parallel thing I may have to do as a project manager. And the last, I need to update the risk management and the impact plans. So any risk that you have identified, it goes through again various stages. You identify, find the large impact factor, then the impact factor may go down because of the actions you are taking, and likewise everything, whatever changes a risk comes across, that particular change you have to document in a risk register. That document is called a risk register that carries everything of the risk, what was the position of the risk in the beginning and what it is now. So that is how we have seen the entire risk life cycle. Where did we start from? We did start from, I take you back initially to the first part. What is risk management? So it's a process of anticipation of upcoming hurdles. Hurdles may be natural, may be human based, may be process based, etc. And further, we look at creation of a concrete plan to avoid these hurdles. That is the process of risk life cycle. Next, we have seen the risk life cycle. What are different phases of risk life cycle? So herein you have the plan phase, you have the identify phase, you have the analysis phase, you have the risk response planning phase, you have the monitoring and controlling of risk responses, and this further takes you back to the identify phase again if required for the residual risks. What are different methods of risk identification? Brainstorming, Delphi method, interview method, root cause analysis method, and the SWOT method. Further to which, what is exactly done in the planning phase? We look into the planning phase about what all team size we need for the process of risk management, how they are going to work with this particular process, and what methodology, technology they need to manage with risks. This whole pre-work is done in the planning phase. Planning phase is done, identification is done. Further, we have seen the analysis phase, wherein we have seen two things, the qualitative analysis and the quantitative analysis. Qualitative analysis talks about prioritizing, categorizing the risks, whereas quantitative analysis talks about making use of a wonderful statistical method that lets the project manager take the right risk, the right solution for the risk that has occurred. I have given you an example of quantitative risk analysis, how it is done by making use of a decision tree. And thereby we looked at the next phase, the risk response planning phase, the second last phase, that talks about how to respond to the positive risks and how to respond to the negative risks. So how to respond to opportunities, how to respond to the threats. And the last part what we have seen is risk monitoring and control. As I had asked you to identify a risk of your own choice, so now you can work along with the risk life cycle and you can really think about how you will be either mitigating the risk or how you will be enhancing the risk, looking at whether the risk is positive and negative. And you can make use of this whole life cycle and these different phases into all areas, in not only in project management, maybe in real life. You can make use of this in any type of in general management as well as in project management. You can make use of this technique in any particular domain, maybe automobile, maybe mechanical, maybe software. And that is how I hope you have understood what a risk is and everything about risk, and I hope in future you will not be worried about any risk that may occur, and you know better how to look upon at a risk and how to tackle with different risks. Thank you.